You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions, episode 54. And now, here are Craig and Jeff.
We're assuming that everyone who's listening is on a Class M Earth-type planet for episode 54, Bread and Circuses. We are your hosts, Jeff Hewlett.
And Craig Cohen.
Oh, the snicker.
I tell you, man, I will never get tired of your pithy little introductions.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Because there's probably many more to come. So, episode 54, we're one episode away from the end of season 2.
Wow, what a journey, huh?
Unbelievable how fast everything has gone.
Yeah.
So, a couple quick news items before we jump into our commentary. The first thing on the agenda could be good news for Trek fans out there who are looking to dive into the world of Trek comic books. There is, Craig, have you ever heard of the Humble Bundle?
I saw a tweet about this today, funnily enough.
Yeah, so in the computer world, the Humble Bundle is something that people kind of wait on and they anticipate. And what it is usually a bunch of different software companies will heavily discount their software packages, will discount their wares if you buy them in a group purchase, part of which is donated to charity. In this case, though, there is a Trek comic Humble Bundle, digital, of course, and it looks like there are a lot of Trek comics that are available for donation. And if you donate any amount, you get Star Trek Classics, Volumes 1 and 2, some Klingon stuff, and the Gold Key Archives, Volume 1.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah,
that's for any donation level?
Any donation level, yeah.
Wow.
And, I'm actually just started reading through the Gold Key Volume 1, and those are the ones that came out during the original series run in the late 60s. So these are the comics that were being published during the original run of the show.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, Chris over at IDW when we were in Vegas told us that initial run of Gold Key Comics, they wrote and drew those stories before the show was even on the air.
Yeah.
So there's some little discrepancies at points, which sounds really, really cool.
Yes, there are. I've read through the first couple of issues, and I've noticed some glaring terminology differences between what they called certain things in the comic and what they called them on the television show. So we'll skip that conversation for now, since we're going to cover comic books later on.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm going to have to look into that because I did not see in that tweet that it was an any donation level type of thing. That's very cool, and hopefully it's some worthwhile charities as well. Very cool.
And there's more donation levels, by the way. If you donate more than the average price, you'll also get some next gen stuff, some DS9 stuff, Star Trek mirror images, and Burden of Knowledge. And if you pay $15 or more, you get 6 more items. So it looks like there's one in there is called Spock Reflections.
Wow.
So anybody who's an original series fan, you may want to jump in there and pay the $15 or more.
Oh, totally.
And then you get all of the donation levels. So it looks like there's a lot of good content here.
Yeah, and I mean, it is digital, like you said, but I think the Gold Key Archives hardcover is going for $15 by itself.
I think it'll be more than that.
Yeah, so that's awesome. That's definitely something to look into. I know I would probably have to fire them up on my computer and read them there, because I don't really have my reading device is a Kindle that is not a tablet type device. It's just solely an e-reader. So
yeah, you would need an iPad or you could read them on a phone too. That might be a little bit difficult, but you could read them on an Android tablet or your computer.
Yeah,
or your computer.
That's very cool. That we should definitely remember to put a link to that in the show notes.
Definitely will. And next news item of the week is a web series called The Red Shirt Diaries. This is a parody series that follows Ensign Williams, a security officer of very low rank. And this is really cool because it's written and stars a lady by the name of Ashley Victoria Robinson.
Okay.
So pretty cool that she's written and stars in these shorts. They follow her character through the first 10 episodes of the original series. So she's tying it directly into TOS.
That's cool.
Yeah, it looks like she's taking the red shirt mythos and turning it into a kind of funny little web series here where she's kind of aware of her expendability, if you will.
Oh, neat. And have you seen anything from it in terms of how it looks in comparison to the original series?
She does a pretty good job. I saw episode 1, which was the man trap, of course, and it's cute the way it's done. It's not she's not on the original series sets or anything, where she has the costume on, and she does some pretty cool little prop stuff. So definitely worth taking a look at if you want a quick laugh or two and a little bit of bolt-on original series content.
Neat.
Yeah, maybe we'll reach out to her and see if she wants to come on the show at some point.
Oh, totally. That would be a great idea.
Yeah, very cool. And, well, third and final news item of the week, and apologies to everyone out there. This is not necessarily TOS related, but this on a personal level for me was a very sad announcement. And that is that the Will Wheaton project has been canceled.
Oh man, I know you. I know we talked about that when it was getting ready to launch.
Yeah,
sad to see that. That I guess they couldn't keep things going between the show and Sci-Fi Network.
Yeah, it was a Sci-Fi Network show, and I'm proud to say that I watched every single episode. I had it on my my series DVR, and I watched every single one, and I enjoyed them quite a bit. And it's a shame that they weren't able to keep the series going. And of course, there were some questions going back and forth, and Will Wheaton posts some stuff on his blog about the lack of advertisement of the show, promotion of the show, and I don't want to get bogged down in drama, but it's a shame that the network didn't really plug it as much as it could have, because it was actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
So sorry, Mr. Will Wheaton. I was a fan. I really enjoyed the episodes that I saw, and maybe down the road somebody will pick the show up.
Yeah, you can only hope.
Yep, we can only hope. So that brings us to the end of our news segment of the show. And are you ready, Craig, to jump into the commentary for Bread and Circuses?
Sure thing.
All right. So, Bread and Circuses aired on the 15th of March, 1968. The remaster aired on the 2nd of June, 2007.
All right. And the NBC press release issued February 20th reads, Captain Kirk and his officers, searching for survivors of a lost ship, become prisoners of the despotic ruler of a planet with 1960s technology and Roman Empire customs in Bread and Circuses on NBC Television Network's Star Trek Colorcast of March 15th.
All right. We will start our scene-specific commentary. Cue up your DVDs, your Blu-rays, your streams. We're going to start in 3, 2, 1.
So this is weird. You got the ship making a kind of a unique move.
With debris flying around.
Yeah. And then everybody on the bridge watching Spock, which just seems really weird to me.
It was kind of strange that you had a little crossfade transition there, and you're seeing literally everyone on the bridge looking in the same direction, which is something that I don't recall ever seeing before.
And who was driving the ship, for lack of a better word, while they were all watching there?
Well, forward momentum. Yeah.
And then I like how Kirk refers to Chekhov here as helmsman.
Navigator.
Yeah, or navigator. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny that a lot of these season 2 episodes feel like they should be in season 1.
Yeah, very weird that is a little bit off-putting. And we're back to planet numbers and not names.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really weird. And of course, this is another Green Beret episode.
Yeah.
So no Sulu.
Yeah, it's crazy to see how different the production order was from the order that they aired things in.
Yeah, and Kirk in his green shirt.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a toss-up. You don't know what you're going to get in the second season. You're going to see him in yellow, or you're going to see him in green. Just, I guess, depends on the whim of the day. But we're flying through the wreckage of a Starfleet vessel, and which I think they did a great job of with the remastered effects. By the way, because you could clearly see a piece of debris fly by that had the coloration of a Starfleet vessel.
Yeah, I'll tell you, they lose a lot of ships in Starfleet.
They certainly do. Well, they have a lot of ships. If you go online and look at the registry of ships, there's a heck of a lot of Starfleet vessels of different classes out there. But Spock is right now telling us that, once again, we are at a planet that pretty much exactly resembles Earth. All of the statistics, from the amount of water against the amount of land, although in a slightly different configuration, is exactly like Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Uhura is picking up, FM and AM radio transmissions.
Yeah, and she's saying that it was a system they once called video, and then Spock says colloquially it was called television.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. And of course it's black and white.
Yeah, and I got to say that the way the crew responds to this footage really shows how their whole mindset had changed by the time of the 23rd century.
Yeah, really. I mean, they're seeing the gladiatorial combat. Yeah, this is pretty poor gladiatorial combat, by the way,
but it's still affecting them. I mean, much like it would probably affect a lot of people seeing, stuff like this. But I think it really illustrated how far they'd come from violence not really being something you're used to seeing.
Yeah, absolutely right. But, did you notice, keep in mind, they just said that the last of the barbarians was in the gladiatorial combat that we were just seeing there.
Yeah.
And later on in the episode, Kirk and company will be referred to as barbarians. So obviously, whoever was on the screen, William Harrison there, was not actually the last of the barbarians.
No.
So we've also found out that, once again, not only do we have an Earth-like planet, but we've got yet another potentially rogue Starfleet captain. This is another recurring theme, or trope, if you will.
Yeah, and it's really funny because I don't want to tip my hand, but I think this is a really solid episode of the series, and I understand that they ran with the scripts they ran with, but did nobody see the comparisons between these stories, or did they just not care?
That may have been another one of those production order versus broadcast order things, because I mean, we literally just saw in the Omega Glory a similar Earth-like planet that developed just like the United States did. So I'm thinking that if you look at the production order, they may be further apart, and maybe if they ran in the order they were produced, it wouldn't have been so jarring. But I definitely agree with you that it seems to be beating you over the head with that every planet they come to is just like Earth.
It almost seems like it could be its own series. Every week, this future ship travels to another alternate Earth.
Yeah, really. Well, thankfully, though, in this episode, we're treated to some cool outdoor shooting.
Yeah, and these shots look really, really great.
They do.
I don't know if it was the location they shot, the way they were shot, but there's a scene coming up where we're sort of tracking with the three, with McCoy, Spock, and Kirk as they're walking, and it just looks really, really great. Here, it's coming up now. I mean, I don't know if it just makes this feel cinematic. We've talked about that before, the moments of the show that really sort of get bigger than TV. And a lot of things in this episode definitely feel bigger than TV for me. I'd imagine watching this for the first time in the late 60s, this had to be a great hour of TV for people.
Oh, I would agree with you. And another thing I want to mention alongside of the how good the outdoor shooting looks, I want to mention how good the outdoor scenes sound.
Oh yeah.
They were able to capture such great audio on these scenes that, you know, you would think being outside, the audio would sound slightly different than it would on a set, but it kind of doesn't.
Yeah, and you can almost wonder how much post, re-recording they did, which is really hard to pull off sometimes.
Yeah, well, to sync up with the lips perfectly, it would be very difficult to do, especially
actually,
back then.
Yeah, here's the shot I was referring to. You just see the landscape behind him, really great.
Yeah, and look how dusty their boots are.
Yeah, oh yeah. And Spock also mentioned that the Prime Directive is in effect here, so...
Yeah, well, you're going to get hit over the head with the Prime Directive in this episode.
Yeah.
They pretty much write Prime Directive on the side of a baseball bat and hit you with it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But, well, another thing that we learned earlier in this episode was that some of the officers from the wrecked ship that they flew through were being subjected to this gladiatorial combat on the planet below, which kind of was spurred Kirk and company into feeling they had to go down there and intervene.
Yeah.
Because there were some Starfleet officers that were being forced to fight for their lives in gladiatorial combat. They didn't just go down there for no reason. They went down there in order to find and rescue some other Starfleet operatives.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So let us not think that they're down there, solely to potentially violate the Prime Directive, but there's a real reason for them to be there.
Yeah.
But you know what? Once again, I'm going to point this out, and I've refrained from saying this in previous episodes, but I'm going to say it here because it really hits home. But once again, they've gone where men have gone before.
Yeah, exactly.
So we just heard the monologue, the famous monologue where no man's gone before, and here we are where other Starfleet people already are.
Mm-hmm.
So very rarely does it seem they go someplace where no one's been.
Yeah.
So,
well, and the funny thing about the Prime Directive in general is, you almost wonder how important it really is. I could see it, being important in certain circumstances. But like, if you think about it, in the Star Trek universe, we had first contact with aliens that didn't care about the Prime Directive.
Yeah, really. They land on Earth, walk out of a ship, and like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah. I guess you don't want to knowingly expose, cultures to things that might blow their mind. But I don't know. To me, it just seems like some of the stuff they do just seems a little too much in terms of protecting, the Prime Directive.
I agree. And I just noticed something that I had never noticed before on this episode. And I'm going to throw this out here because this is the first time Craig and I, when we do these commentaries, we watch the episodes with subtitles on so that we can follow the dialogue. And one of the, I hate to spoil the end of the episode, but something that just came up really smacked me in the face is at the end of the episode, they reveal that the worshippers of the sun, which are who these people are, worship the sun, the S-O-N, not the S-U-N, which is quote unquote the Son of God. But in the subtitles, it's spelled S-U-N.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So even the subtitles try to fool you.
Yeah.
Into thinking. But at any rate,
it's a good point.
Something else I wanted to point out too that I thought was a little bit odd. Well, two things that are a little bit odd.
That they took their phasers and didn't take their communicators?
Well, not just that, but the fact that number one, they beamed down with no security contingent.
Oh, right.
Whatsoever.
Yeah,
they knew
the core trio.
Yeah, they knew ahead of time that members of another ship's crew were being forced to fight in gladiatorial combat. So they knew there was danger there, but they did not opt to beam down with a security contingent. And also, for some strange reason, this episode, they did not have the computer give them local clothing.
Yeah.
We've seen that they have that capability in other episodes, but in this one, with the Prime Directive smacking you across the face, they still opt to beam down in their regular uniforms.
Yeah.
So you would think if they cared that much about the Prime Directive, they would have thrown on some Roman era clothing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So this older actor here
Mm-hmm.
is Ian Wolfe, who died in 1992 at the age of 95. But it's worth mentioning him because we're going to see him in season 3 in All Our Yesterdays.
Oh, cool.
So another actor that will get recycled, if you will, and recast.
Oh, well, that's always good to see. I love to see people coming back and doing another episode that aren't necessarily corrupt captains.
Yeah. So I really, really like the concept of this episode, probably the most out of all the alternate Earth episodes we've seen this season. The idea of an Earth where Rome never fell,
right,
is really kind of a really, really neat concept.
Yeah, I like the fact that Star Trek took the opportunity to explore things like this. And this is, if you were a history buff, this might be something that you talked about with friends or with colleagues. That, like, what would have happened? What would our world be like today if XYZ didn't happen?
Yeah.
What if the Germans won World War II? What if Rome never fell? Stuff like, I mean, it's great to talk about, and I love that Star Trek examined that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is probably one of the most sort of unique takes on the alternate history line, in my opinion. I mean, what if the Nazis had won the war? That's kind of, I don't want to say obvious, but it's kind of obvious, where this one just seems really kind of a lot more unique to me. Well, yeah. Especially, where they transpose it into, the what is supposed to be considered the 1960s on this planet.
Right. So we're assuming that if Rome had never fell, that they would technologically be at the same place that we were in the 1960s in the real world, right?
Yeah. And what I dig about that is they're not developing a constitution that's exactly similar to us.
Right.
It really is a society that developed completely independently and turned out much, much differently than our Earth, which I think is just really, really, really cool.
No, I agree. I think it's cool, but we're learning that this Captain Merrick, who arrived on this planet 6-ish years ago, has joined the ranks of the Romans, the oppressors, and I think that it's interesting to note that it seems like every Starfleet captain isn't up to the level of Kirk as far as integrity is concerned.
Yeah, and I know we mentioned that on our previous episodes, but it seems like they definitely needed a better vetting system for weeding out the opportunistic or easily corruptible captains, because you see that Kirk is presented the same exact choice as Merrick later in this episode, and he does the right thing.
Right.
So it's not one of those cases of saying, oh, if you were in his shoes, you do the same thing. Well, it's like, no, I'm a man of integrity. I took some kind of oath to Starfleet, and I'm gonna uphold their rules and observe, their laws.
Yeah. Well, I'll save my comments about that till when we get to that actual place in the episode, because it's an interesting argument to talk about Merrick and the reasons why he's doing what he's doing. Yeah. So that could be a whole nother conversation in and of itself. But before we get too far away from a few of the things that have passed already in this episode, I wanted to mention this is something that we've mentioned in the past. This is the only episode that I'm aware of where the crew of the Enterprise, Spock specifically, calls out the fact that English is the primary language of an alien world.
Yeah. So it definitely, I think you're definitely on point there. I think we're used to just normally assuming that they're using the universal translator, but here it was pointed out, and I guess it was just pointed out for the express purpose of of selling the end of the episode.
Yeah, yeah, really. Well, I almost appreciated that though,
Hmm.
that that they would go to the lengths to say that wow, there's so many similarities here, and be self-aware about it,
Yeah.
and not just leave the audience to assume that every other planet, obviously would speak the same language as we would.
Yeah.
But very cool. And did you notice that all of their sweatshirts have some chain links printed on them?
Very, very cool. And I instantly thought that this would be some very, very easy cosplay.
Good call.
Because I'm all about the easy cosplay because I tend to get very grand with my cosplay ideas, which ultimately leads to failure. But I don't know. This seems like a really cool, you just go get some sweats, cut them up, and I guess get a Sharpie and go to town.
Draw them right on. Now I love the recycled costumes they have in this episode. Obviously, those the military police looking gentlemen with the white helmets on, they recycled costumes from other series.
Yeah.
In order to create those looks, and once again Spock has a wool hat on to cover up his ears.
Yeah.
And we got the reveal there, but the reaction of this military police type officer to seeing Spock's ears was not one of revulsion.
No.
He was just like, "Oh yeah, you're just one of those barbarian guys."
Yeah.
So very strange that they didn't have some sort of a visceral reaction to seeing an obvious alien.
Yeah.
On their world, right?
Yeah, and Kirk's in his log is explaining how similar things are, even though they are incredibly different.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess you kind of have to go with it at this point because due to the limited budgets of the show, I hate to take us out of the mode of the show itself, but I guess this is another one of those instances where the budget kind of weighs pretty heavily, and they had to rely on what they had that they could produce cheaply.
Oh sure, yeah, I think it works.
Oh yeah,
like I said earlier, I think the idea that this one civilization maintained its supremacy, if you will, while developing through the years. I don't know. For me, it's really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, once again, on an Earth-like planet, they wind up getting locked in a jail cell.
Yeah.
So we've seen that previously, but this scene specifically, I find pretty interesting because, Star Trek is pretty famous, of course, for examining social themes of the time. And we're getting some dialogue at this point that sort of gives us a hint as to what the writers were trying to allude to. And you have a society where the Romans are in charge and they had slaves, but over the course of the years they created some laws to keep rebellions suppressed, and a couple of those things were medical payments,
yeah,
and old age pensions.
Yeah.
So to keep the lower classes in line, the government made certain concessions. And that was kind of what was going on in the 60s. People were concerned about that type of thing. And it reflects in the writing of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the fact that you can watch this show and kind of get a flavor for what the big issues of the day were in the 1960s.
Oh, totally. And that's one of the things I've really loved about this show. And we've talked about it. And I think we actually mentioned it on a show we did that we didn't even mention in the intro. We were on the Atomic Geekdom podcast recently, and we talked Trek with them for about an hour. And we mentioned that one of the cool things about Star Trek is, all the stuff beyond, the surface level stuff that's going on.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And maybe when we get to the end of the episode, we'll talk a little bit more about our appearance on the Atomic Geekdom podcast and let the audience know a little bit more about it. Did you happen to notice in this scene that just went by that Flavius, the former gladiator, called Kirk Captain?
Oh, and I didn't catch that.
I thought that was interesting that he calls Kirk Captain instead of calling him Kirk or Alien or Outlander or Jim or anything, but he calls him Captain.
Yeah.
It's interesting writing.
Yeah, and that is actor Rhodes Reason, one of the coolest names ever.
That is awesome.
Born 1930, and I knew him most for, of all things, in addition to this, a movie from the 80s called King Kong Escapes.
Nice.
So very, very cool. And I love how quick the three of them determined, or Kirk determines that it's 3-on-3. This is going to be their best opportunity to break free.
Yeah, and they're quickly defeated.
Yeah, but it's really cool to see that you can tell that they're a really, really good team in the fact that they're all on the same page enough that they can spring a plan like that very quickly.
I agree, and that's another a big plus to the Trinity here.
Yeah,
the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy trio. I love the fact that the three of them are so in tune with each other. But there was another reference here that just went past that I wanted to throw out too. And I know Star Trek is pretty famous for alluding to the hippie movement of the 60s. And Flavius made a comment that the followers of the sun, the message of the sun that is that all men are brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, that was one of the big hippie messages of the 60s was that, love your brother, love your sister. We're all humans. We're all one. I love how they constantly allude to that in the writing of this show, and there'll be more references to it later on.
Yeah.
So now we're seeing that there's another guy here kind of pulling the puppet strings of Captain Merrick.
Yeah, Marcus.
Yes.
Who's just a really, really standout performer in this episode for me.
Oh, spectacular.
Just some really, really great acting here from Logan Ramsey. Died in 2000 at the age of 79, and he did TV work like a lot of his, colleagues in the 60s. Mission Impossible, Hawaii Five-0, MASH, Charlie's Angels, Quincy M.E., Mork and Mindy, Battlestar Galactica, Knight Rider. So he was pretty active right through the 80s and beyond.
Yeah, I remember when I saw this episode as a younger kid that he stood out to me because I had seen him. He was so recognizable to me. I remember seeing him in other shows.
Yeah.
So I didn't recognize the quality of the acting at the time, but in subsequent watches, I realized how great a performance he delivers in this episode. And he's another one of those actors that, to me, does a great performance without even having to say much. Look, I mean,
yeah,
his mannerisms, he's able to convey emotion.
Yeah.
Look at the way he's playing to the camera and the way he's, looking at the other actors.
Yeah. And there's almost like an arrogance.
Yes.
In the performance, which is so subtle, but for me, it really, really sells it.
I totally agree. And I love the fact that right now, Mericus, who was the captain of the vessel that was destroyed, he appears to be almost in charge. But as the episode continues, we find that he's really not calling any shots.
Mm-hmm.
So we're being led to believe that this captain, came to this planet and maybe put himself in a position where he was in power, but it really isn't the case. He winds up being just almost a pawn, if you will. Great moment here, by the way, between Spock and McCoy.
In an episode full of great moments between Spock and McCoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one coming up which I think is incredible.
Yeah.
We'll get to when we get there, but...
Yeah, even earlier when Flavius was in the cell talking to Kirk, he said, "Are they enemies?" When Spock and McCoy were bickering, which and Kirk said, "I'm not sure." So this episode's really good at sort of really shaping and furthering that relationship between Spock and McCoy.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and I can't wait to get to one of the scenes coming up later on. I think it's incredible. I can't wait to talk about it. But now we're kind of arguing where we're arguing between the Enterprise crew and Captain Mericus or Merrick about the violation of the Prime Directive, and it seems as if Merrick has briefed the people of the planet about his orders and his oaths to Starfleet, and they're going to use that against Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to use the old you've sworn to die to protect the Prime Directive, so they want Kirk to call down all of the people who are on the Enterprise, so that they will be forced to stay there or compete in gladiatorial combat for the rest of their lives, because they don't want to risk their planet being discovered by outside influences and ruining the order that they've created there.
Yeah, and the funny thing about this is, obviously Kirk, gives a code, but I'd like to think that even if Kirk did go ahead and give this order straight up, that Scotty, who seems to be in command on this episode when they're off ship, would have had his doubts, because we've seen Scotty doubt orders from the captain before.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But as you said, he's going to issue a secret code word. But this made me wonder if maybe there should have been a button on the tricorder. I mean, not the tricorder, the communicator, that indicated some sort of a trouble.
Yeah.
Without them having to actually say anything, because there's been a whole bunch of times where, they're being forced to communicate, or they're communicating around aliens or dangerous individuals, where if they just could press a button and say, "Hey, listen, beam us up immediately,"
yeah,
they could have avoided all this. I mean, think technology-wise. I mean, we have buttons on our phones now to call 911, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That kind of stuck out to me as one of the things that could have aided them in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
But earlier on, I also wanted to mention real quick that Star Trek has alluded to the Vietnam War.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Prior to this, and there was a moment where, Flavius, who was a gladiator, he was one of the if not the top gladiator. Prior to joining the followers of the Sun, he says that they said we're going to make you fight again. He's been captured. They're going to make him fight again. He's refusing to fight.
Yeah.
And I was wondering to myself, do you think that his refusal to participate in the fighting was a statement on people who refused to be a part of the Vietnam War? I mean, there were Americans who refused to go there.
I think you could definitely take that away from that and be, at least, justified in that takeaway. I mean, there's definitely enough evidence to support it. I mean, based on the time period. So yeah, I would totally, I can totally see that.
Cool.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to point out here is we just saw the dual moons of that planet.
Oh,
and
nice.
Unfortunately we passed it, probably a half hour ago, where when they first beamed down, you saw subtly in the background the two moons.
That's pretty cool. Good note. I didn't notice that.
Yeah. So that's something to look for next time you take a pass through this episode.
Very cool. I love how Scotty is adhering to the Prime Directive, but finding a way to skirt around it.
Yeah, I love seeing Scotty in this position, and I'm glad to see him back there, because a few episodes back they sort of leapfrogged Scotty, didn't they?
Yeah. Yep.
And somebody else was in command.
Did you notice Uhura in the background there?
Yeah.
She's kind of got squinty eyes, and she's kind of, looking at Scotty skeptically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that nonverbal acting.
Yeah, and here is another sequence that I just really, really adore, which is the gladiator set on a soundstage that is about to be broadcast over Empire TV.
Yes.
Which I just love. I just love the fact that the games went from being in real arenas with real crowds to eventually being on sound stages and studios with piped in for laugh tracks, if you will.
Exactly. And they point out the fact that it's in color.
Yeah.
But I was going to mention this a little bit later because they're going to show some of these control consoles where they're turning the levels of cheers and cat calls and boos up and down. So this episode kind of gives the viewing audience at home a glimpse of what making a TV show at the time looked like.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that was pretty radical.
Yeah, I love how they got this little white cardboard thing with the word sound effects written on it and stuck it on that little machine the guy was working on.
Yeah.
But I don't know how aware people were back then of what a TV show looked like if you zoom the cameras way out.
Yeah.
And you saw that it was all just a stage, and you could see the cameramen working, and you could see the gaffers in the background, and you could see the director. I think this is really cool from that aspect.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah, very neat. Now, we're seeing something that we don't see very often here, and that is McCoy engaging in physical combat.
Yeah, and he's paired off with Flavius, who...
Thankfully.
Yeah, who is definitely pulling punches, if you will. But it's also great to see Spock holding his own here, and at the same time knowing that Kirk is willing to sacrifice Spock and McCoy to prove his point to Marcus and Merrick.
Yep. Now, yeah, I agree with you on that, and I also want to point out that not only is Spock holding his own, but he's talking trash.
Yeah, he's saying, "I can beat you."
He's like, "I can best you," and he's warning him. I love that he's so confident.
Yeah.
In his combat skills. And, once again, McCoy is very, very lucky. Look at that. You got a guy dressed in full Roman garb holding a machine gun.
Yeah, what a great visual.
Very, very strange to see that.
Yeah.
But cool at the same time.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and here's where we get Kirk questioning the rules and wondering if Spock dispatches his man, if he can help McCoy. And the answer is sadly no.
But he does it anyway. Yeah. They don't follow. They didn't really put the rules out there.
Yeah, I mean, they're really at the whim of Spock and McCoy and Kirk here, because the one guy said to Flavius, you fight, or else if our ratings go down, we're going to do a special on you. But really, if they're dependent on ratings, their hands are almost instantly tied.
Yeah, I love the fact that they mention the fact that they have ratings.
Yeah.
On this planet, so another nod to the fact that this planet is paralleling Earth technologically, but not culturally.
Yeah.
So interesting little. Well, look at McCoy and Flavius are kind of going back and forth here, and Flavius is trying to make it look good.
Yeah, Flavius said, "Defend yourself," and McCoy said, "I am."
Well, I guess that really goes to emphasize the point that while Kirk and by the way, I sorry for cutting myself off there, but I love Kirk in this particular portion of this scene. He is totally confident.
Yeah.
And he is using his intellect as opposed to his physical prowess. By trying to throw them off by saying, I've seen things on other planets that are much more barbaric than this, and they're used as forms of entertainment. So you guys are really wussies, man.
Yeah.
This is nothing compared to what I've seen elsewhere, and you think you're gonna break me?
Yeah.
With this, and Kirk maintains that same demeanor pretty much through the entire episode.
Yeah. And they're also pointing out here, Merrick sort of points out how much more special Kirk is than him.
Yeah, I love that. That Merrick is saying that a starship he was a captain of a small vessel, but he makes it a point to say a starship captain is really a special breed.
Yeah, and his crew as well.
Yes, so that once again we get the acknowledgement that Kirk and his crew are kind of the creme de la creme of Starfleet.
Yeah.
Top-notch people who are once again incorruptible.
Yeah.
Incorruptible.
So I think it might have passed already, but we got some great. Actually, here it is, right here. Some less than great McCoy stunt doubling.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I thought the stunt double looked more like Shatner to me.
Yeah, he looked a little too beefy.
Yeah, and the hair was all wrong.
Yeah, and there Spock just shut down Flavius.
Yep. Sorry, Flavius. This episode, I guess something else that I wanted to point out sound-wise in this episode is that once again we are treated to a cornucopia of really iconic Trek music.
Yeah, we had the great fight music.
Yep, you get the Amok Time music again, and you get some of the other really famous musical cues from past episodes used again and again. And recycling sometimes you think is a bad thing, but in this I think it really makes the episode feel familiar.
Yeah, and it's funny because in movies, a lot of times there'll be a defined theme that in sequels, even if it's a different composer, that composer's still working with that theme. So if you expand that over a 3 season run of Star Trek, it does definitely help make it feel more cohesive.
Oh,
that's
definitely.
That's a great point that I never really thought about before in defense of recycling music.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing that we'll get into later on down the road when we talk about the movies, is that the movies, some of them shared the same theme music, if you will, but it wasn't the same music for all 6 movies.
Yeah. So
I mean, you had 2 movies that used the motion picture theme. You had 2 movies that used the quote unquote Wrath of Khan theme, and then you had 2 that had their own music. So it was almost kind of jarring that you didn't get the same music. Like you go in and watch Superman movies, and they have the same theme music, right?
Yeah.
So even though they're directed by different people or they're written by different people, you get that familiar theme music. And that was always something about the original series movies that kind of threw me for a loop, is that they didn't settle on a theme and stick with it.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's a case of people being involved just not realizing how iconic some of that music was.
Oh, for sure. And although the original Alexander Courage theme music wasn't used for the 6 original series movies, it was kind of sprinkled in here and there. One of the things that I really did like about the JJ movies is they did return to that original fanfare.
Yeah.
So that to me was a great thing. Oh, and here is that scene that I talked about earlier.
Yeah, this is really great because it's McCoy attempting to sort of apologize to Spock.
Yeah, they really and he almost breaks Spock down.
Yeah.
Emotionally. I mean, he tries to break Spock apart into his human part and his Vulcan part, and you really get to see these 2 characters playing together, and you see their 2 different personalities, or 2 almost opposite personalities, as Spock is trying desperately to find a way out of this jail cell. And McCoy says he tried it 15 different times.
Mm-hmm.
Now that almost would say to you that Spock is having some sort of a desperate feeling, that he wants to find a way out of this, but Spock would have you believe that it's all driven by logic.
Yeah.
But the dialogue in this scene, I think, is maybe one of the best interactions between McCoy and Spock of the entire series.
Yeah, and I guess now is the perfect time to mention that this episode was written by Gene L. Kuhn and Gene Roddenberry.
Mm-hmm.
So the father of the show and the man who really sort of ran that show on a day-to-day basis,
mm-hmm.
Teaming up for a script. So it's not this is the level of writing you sort of expect from the two of them.
Yes, I agree. That's a great statement.
Yeah.
And I love the emotion on Nimoy's face right there.
Yeah.
As McCoy is doing his best to break Spock apart and try to get some sort of an emotional reaction out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And questioning the fact that Spock is doing everything he can to bury his human half.
Yeah.
And you can see for an instant, he gets to him.
Yeah.
And then Spock is able to compose himself. There you go. And he just composes himself.
Yeah, if he did some kind of Vulcan, probably mantra of some kind.
Yep. Again, nonverbal acting.
Yeah.
Which, it sticks out in this episode a lot to me. A lot of the different actors in this episode pull it off well. And that was a great example by Nimoy. But you can still see the disdain and the sadness almost in his face as the scene shifts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about I guess we talked about the writers of the episode, we should mention real quick while we can. Directed by a director we've seen before. He directed a total of 6 episodes of the series. We last saw him on Return to Tomorrow, and that is director Ralph Senensky, who we will next see for the final time in the season 3 episode, Is There in Truth No Beauty?
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and Ralph Senensky is still going strong. He's in his 90s.
Wow.
And he's actually got a website, so it's very neat. And according to IMDb, he's got a short film that is in post-production.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah. So always cool to see those kinds of careers.
Wow.
So here is Kirk sort of being bribed.
Yeah, and once again, it's Kirk has to have some sort of an interaction with a female.
Mm-hmm. But here, I mean, there's a purpose for it. On Kirk's end, it's just another conquest, really, that he didn't have to work too hard for. But on the Roman end of things, it was really sort of a way to pay him off, or to weaken him, or to seduce him into sort of bending to their desires.
Yeah, I don't know if I can agree with that, because
really,
because we're gonna find out here that the proconsul was gonna kill him anyway.
Yeah,
he was giving Kirk one last night as a man.
Oh, right,
because he respects him. Kirk wasn't easily broken as Merrick was. He respects Kirk, and you're going to see it here. He's going to send Merrick away.
Yeah.
Say, get out of here, dude.
It really is a huge dismissal. And
big backhand.
Yeah, I did overlook the fact that this really was just sort of Kirk's final, I guess, his last meal.
Yeah, and well, in the proconsul, he says, well, I owed you that. I felt like I owed that to you, because you're a man, you're a formidable opponent. And I wanted to give you a good send-off. Yeah. And he's going to tell him he's going to give him an easy death.
Yes, a swift, clean, easy death.
Yeah, and I love how Kirk just plays along with it. The guy, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I gave you some last hours as a man.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And once again, quality acting moment by Shatner.
Yeah, and it's funny, Marcus talks about having to showcase that defiance should be punished, whereas who really needs to learn from this? The viewing audience, or
the viewing audience in the Roman planet, not us.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, what were they really exposed to on TV in terms of seeing Kirk?
Well, they weren't, but what they did see was Spock breaking the rules.
Yeah.
And I guess there's a connection that we're assumed to understand between Spock-McCoy and the execution of Kirk on TV, which we're about to see.
Yeah.
That we can't allow people to defy our rules and break our rules without consequence.
Yeah, but from a TV viewing perspective, wouldn't it be more effective to kill Spock here?
Yeah, potentially.
He's the face of the of the the Defiance.
Yes, but earlier in the episode, Marcus said he would love to have 50 Vulcans. He's got one now.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we shouldn't gloss over the fact that Scotty's come up with a plan where they are going to basically cause a blackout.
Right.
And we get the great Flavius run-in and some really advanced choreography here where we had bodies being blocked by, blocking machine gun fire. Some real exciting stuff going on.
Yeah, very well done. It's amazing that Kirk didn't get hit by that machine gun fire.
Yeah, I mean, all the choreography worked there.
Yeah, very well done.
And we had the blackout came at just the right minute. And I got to say, I really, really enjoy the final minutes of this episode. It's thrilling. It's got action, but it's all makes sense and it all serves the story, which for me is just really where it's at.
Very cool observation. I think we also didn't mention earlier that the Marcus mentioned that one of the communicators was missing.
Yes, which is a little foreshadowing.
Yeah, and they had Merrick pat Kirk down to see if Kirk was in possession of the communicator, which he wasn't. But now we're going to find out that Merrick himself was the one that took the communicator.
Yeah.
And made an attempt to alert the Enterprise, but was quickly thwarted.
Yeah, but he did, I guess he redeemed himself.
Yep.
Tossing the communicator into the cell there.
With a little smile.
Yeah. So it's good. You get a nice little redemptive arc. And then the machine gun fire while they are beaming up is just, God, bravo to this whole end sequence.
Yeah, I like the fact that this establishes the you can't be shot while you're in the process of beaming concept.
And I also loved how Marcus sold the gunshots and then also them beaming away. It's really great. And then
Kirk
here we have, I guess,
Tricorder.
Yeah, Kirk doing the alternate log because normally he can record right at his chair. No.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think he just hits a button on the arm there, and
yeah. So it was cool to see Scotty he got to hear Kirk give his recommendation that Scotty be recognized for what he did.
No, I love the fact that Uhura gets to do some monologuing here at the end of the episode. She rarely gets to talk or recite a lot of lines, and she's really driving home the final point of the episode.
Yeah, and it's great that Uhura wasn't just sitting there waiting. She was listening to and analyzing a lot of their old radio broadcasts and really cracked the code that is the sun, the people of the sun.
Yeah, and the sun. She's equated it to the Son of God. Now, the other three of them had assumed it was the sun, as the sun in the sky, and now Kirk is putting it together that Christianity is on the rise on that planet, and whereas Rome was overtaken in our own world much earlier on. Now, the same thing essentially is happening again in this planet, but on a different scale of time.
Yeah, and Kirk seems incredibly intrigued by that and the idea of being able to see that happen again.
Yeah, and funny, McCoy even seems to be happy about it as well.
Yeah.
So in a show that famously doesn't have religious overtones, this episode ends with some pretty heavy religious overtones.
Yeah. So here we are at the end, and I guess we should have our essential or non-essential discussion.
All right, go for it.
All right, I'm going to say I probably tipped my hand a little bit early in this episode. I got to say, in addition to this being a really, really solid episode, in my opinion, from a script standpoint, direction standpoint, acting standpoint, overall, this is a really, really solid episode in that department. It's entertaining. It's really, really entertaining for me. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But I also think there's enough going on here to deem it essential. And we've talked a lot already about the redundancy of the alternate history. But here I think they really sort of nailed it. And in addition to driving home any kind of prime directive ideas, again, which I think are done really well in this episode with the way Scotty sort of skirts around it, you've also got that great McCoy and Spock relationship that's developing, and the moments between them alone, if you throw everything else out the window, make this an essential episode for me.
Wow. Oh, it's a great rundown. So I don't have a heck of a lot more to say about that. I want to specifically call out again that scene in the jail cell between McCoy and Spock, which I think should be almost required watching for a Trek fan of the original series. But I'm going to have to differ on my essential vote.
Wow.
On this episode. Yeah, and character moments are great, and we've seen a lot of character moments in prior episodes, and this episode to me I think is going to fall on the non-essential side. So there are no series firsts really that are memorable or lasting, and I'm going to vote non-essential, but I'm going to again use the caveat of an honorable mention for this episode, where I wouldn't necessarily say it's one that you shouldn't watch, but just for that one scene alone. But I can't say there's anything in this episode that makes me say that you can't possibly miss this.
All right, well, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yep. So we're divided.
Yeah, and we'd love to know what you think. And,
sure.
We've been getting a lot of great interactions on Twitter and Facebook. On Twitter, we are TTT_pod. And on Facebook, we are the Tricorder Transmissions.
Yep.
And then we're also have a message system or a forum over at the tricordertransmissions.com. And I know all three of those have been, slowly picking up steam in terms of the interaction we've been having each week after the episodes go up. And it's great to read the thoughts of the listeners and how they respond to some of the things we've said.
Yes, I agree. And to throw another piece on that, our season 2 wrap-up episode will be coming in a couple of weeks. So if you do, by any chance, differ with us on any of our essential votes, and if you go to the tricordertransmissions.com and look at our episodes page, you can see how we voted on all the previous episodes in the second season. So if you have things you disagree with us on, please let us know, and we will definitely include your input on our season 2 wrap-up episode. We'd love to have we've got some guests lined up already who are going to come on and talk about where they differ with us. So anybody out there who's a listener and wants to chip in to that conversation, please drop us a line and let us know.
Yeah, I know. I'm really looking forward to the season 2 wrap up episode. Those are always based on our season 1 wrap up. I'm very much looking forward to this. Oh, yeah. And also, we mentioned during the bulk of the commentary that we were on another podcast recently.
Yes, we were invited to be on the Atomic Geekdom podcast, and that came about. I was on Twitter one day, I don't know, few weeks ago, and I was on our Tricorder Transmissions account, and I was looking at the Star Trek hashtag, and I saw an article written by one of the Geekdom guys that was about the episode Devil in the Dark. And that being my favorite episode, I was intrigued. I read it. It was a really good article, and I retweeted it. And we started getting a little commentary that way. We got some back and forth comments talking between us and the Geekdom guys, and that's kind of how we got into got to be invited to be part of their show.
Yeah, and it's a really it was a really great discussion. We talked with Jason and Dave for about an hour, and we sort of stepped outside of the original series a little bit and talked Trek at a little bit of a higher level, but we still focused on the original series because a lot of the stuff that we talked about, we had to serve up favorite episodes, favorite villains, favorite characters, stuff like that. It's a really it was a really great discussion. And if you enjoy this show, it's definitely worth a listen. I know Ken Mills, who we co-host Zilch with. I know he hit us up on Facebook today and let us know how much he enjoyed that conversation. So thanks for listening, Ken, and hopefully you all check it out, because the guys over at Atomic Geekdom are putting out a pretty good podcast.
Yeah, I was very impressed with their professionalism. They put together a great show. They keep it nice and clean. The conversations are tight, and they have a good agenda together. It's not a loose, talk about whatever you want. They had some good questions lined up, and they kept the conversation moving. So, great work, guys, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to do some more podcasting with you.
Oh, definitely. So I guess that brings us to the end of another week, huh?
Yeah, man. Episode 54 in the can.
Yeah. So next week is what? Assignment Earth?
Assignment Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think our fan base, from what I've gathered, is bitterly divided on Assignment Earth. So I'm looking forward to talking about it. I've got a comment earlier from one of our friends that we met at the convention who apparently has some serious disdain for Assignment Earth. So looking forward to getting into that.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that. So I guess I will see you next week.
Yes, you will. Thanks to everybody for listening, as always. We'll be back with you in 7 days.
The Roman Empire flourished for hundreds of years. The ruling powers of the empire thought the key to survival was to keep the people happy. Give them what they want. That way they won't question their rulers, won't question their government. So the emperor made sure they were very happy. He gave them food, which filled their stomachs, and entertainment, which occupied their minds. The people were none the wiser, for he gave them bread and circuses. This is the first episode that really describes the Prime Directive, the moral code of non-interference that would become the cornerstone of Star Trek philosophy. The Prime Directive prevents members of Starfleet from interfering in the normal development or affairs of another society. In reality, however, it was a rule designed to be broken. The Prime Directive is actually a dramatic construct created by Star Trek's writers. It puts our heroes, Kirk, Spock, and the rest, in the position of having to break the rules in order to solve a problem. And this puts them in jeopardy. If we were to total all the times that Captain Kirk and his crew have broken the Prime Directive, I'm sure it would be enough to have them all thrown out of Starfleet. Bread and Circuses marks the first and only reference in Star Trek to contemporary religious beliefs. Gene Roddenberry tried to omit all references to religion from the series, partially because of his own beliefs. He also felt that organized religion wouldn't exist in the 23rd century. So it's surprising that he let this episode, with its Christian overtones and reference to the Son of God, slip by. Bread and Circuses is also a wry commentary on the business of television. This episode was produced in 1967. It foreshadowed the television of the 80s and 90s, complete with gladiators and human suffering. As they say, anything for a rating.